July 1944, northern Norway. A lone fighter limps across a grey Arctic sky, trailing smoke over a frozen sea. It's a British Corsair, the Whistling Death, a machine feared by every Axis pilot in the Pacific. But today, far from the Pacific, it's dying. The pilot, Lieutenant Matherley, knows his engine won't last another minute. Oil pressure is gone, fuel nearly out. He's deep inside enemy territory, with no radio contact, no chance of rescue. The Corsair shudders, its massive propeller slowing to silence. He scans the endless white below and makes his choice. He forces the crippled plane down on a stretch of frozen earth near Bodo. The landing is brutal as the undercarriage collapses, the fuselage skids, and snow explodes in every direction. Yet somehow, the Corsair survives. The pilot scrambles out, smoke burning his eyes, and tries to set the aircraft ablaze. But the cold Arctic air won't cooperate. The flare fizzles out. The fuel is too frozen to burn. Within an hour, German patrols arrive. They expect wreckage. Instead, they find a miracle, an American-made F4U Corsair, almost perfectly intact. Word travels fast. The Luftwaffe has captured one of the most advanced fighters in the Allied arsenal, a machine that Germany had only heard rumors about. Within hours, orders are sent to move the aircraft to Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's secret testing base north of Berlin. What began as a forced landing would soon become one of the strangest intelligence coups of the entire war. The enemy now had the Whistling Death in their hands, and they were determined to unlock its secrets. But what the Germans discovered next would shake their confidence in their own engineering and reveal just how far behind they had fallen. The Germans arrived quickly, drawn by reports from local informants who had seen the crash. Snow still drifted across the field as they surrounded the wreck. The pilot was already gone, captured by a patrol hour earlier, but the aircraft that was the real prize. The Corsair sat motionless, its wings folded like a sleeping beast, paint scorched and chipped, but the frames intact. The soldiers circled it in silence, not fully understanding what they were looking at. They had never seen anything like it. One officer tapped the fuselage and muttered, "Amerikanisch." Another ran his hand along the folded wings, puzzled by their shape. The bent gull-wing design looked unnatural, alien, almost alive. It was unlike any German fighter they knew. Photographs were taken immediately, and a coded message was sent to Luftwaffe headquarters in Oslo. Within hours, the report reached Berlin. A fully intact enemy aircraft of unknown type, believed to be American. The response came swiftly secure against it, protecting it and preparing it for transport. For the Luftwaffe, this was a gift from the gods. By mid-1944, the air war had turned against Germany. Allied bombers roamed freely, and German aircraft struggled to keep up. Any chance to study a new enemy design, especially one as advanced as the Corsair, could mean survival. The recovery began that same night. Under the pale Arctic moon, engineers and soldiers worked near silence, cutting a path through the frozen terrain. They drained the remaining fuel, detached the wings, and wrapped the fuselage in heavy canvas. Even damaged, the aircraft radiated power. Its massive radial engine was unlike anything in their hangars. When the convoy finally moved out, guarded by SS units, it began one of the strangest journeys of the war. From the edge of the Arctic Circle to the heart of Germany, the Corsair traveled more than 1,500 kilometers across a continent at war. The first leg took it by truck to the coast, through winding roads and occupied villages, where civilians stared in disbelief at the strange blue fighter with American stars still faintly visible beneath the snow. From there, it was loaded onto a barge, drifting silently through Norway's fjords under camouflage netting. The journey south continued through Denmark, across bridges bombed only days before, each stop documented and reported. Rumors spread quickly among Luftwaffe ground crews. Some claimed the Allies had built a new super fighter that could outrun any German plane. Others whispered that the Corsair could turn invisible to radar or that it carried secret armor beneath its paint. The myths grew as the machine moved, protected under strict orders. 18 days later, it arrived at Rechlin, Germany's top-secret test center, hidden deep in pine forests north of Berlin. This was Luftwaffe's Forbidden City, where captured Spitfires, P-38S and B-17S had been brought to be dissected, analyzed, and copied. But even among these trophies, the Corsair stood apart. When the canvas was peeled back, the technicians fell silent. The aircraft was enormous. Its wings, engine, and propeller all outsized anything they had tested before. The blue paint still shimmered faintly beneath the dust. Hauptmann Hans-Werner Lerche, a veteran test pilot, was the first to inspect it. He had flown everything, Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, even early jets. Yet as he walked around the Corsair, he realized he was looking at a different philosophy of war. He studied the landing gear, built to slam onto aircraft carriers at terrifying speeds, and realized it could survive impacts that would destroy most German fighters. He examined the R-2800 engine with 2,000 horsepower of raw, stable strength and shook his head. Germany's own engines pushed the limits of reliability, but this American machine seemed overbuilt, rugged, and unbreakable. When he climbed into the cockpit, the surprise deepened. Every dial, every switch, every control was positioned for clarity and speed. The canopy gave wide visibility, the seat was comfortable, the levers responsive. Even the throttle's movement felt deliberate, smooth, forgiving, almost human. Lerche later wrote that it felt like a pilot's machine, not an engineer's dream. He wasn't just impressed, he was disturbed. For years, the Luftwaffe had chased the complexity of high-altitude interceptors, rocket planes, and jets. Yet here was an aircraft built simply to win fights. Word of the discovery reached Hermann Goering within days. The Luftwaffe chief demanded a full report. Despite Germany's collapsing air defenses, he saw opportunity. If they could unlock the Corsair's secrets, perhaps they could design a countermeasure or even use its principles to improve their own desperate projects. He ordered the tests to proceed immediately, under strict secrecy. No Allied insignia was to remain visible. The Corsair was repainted in Luftwaffe grey, the black crosses replacing the white stars. Mechanics checked every system, replaced fluids, patched bullet holes, and fueled it for flight. When the engines were tested for the first time, the sound shook the hangar. The R-2800 came alive with a deep, rolling thunder that rattled the tools off benches. German engineers covered their ears and stared in disbelief. It was unlike anything they had ever heard. Not the sharp, metallic scream of a Daimler-Benz, but a heavy, resonant growl. Lerche watched the gauges from the cockpit, feeling the power surge through the frame. At that moment, he knew this was no ordinary test. This was a glimpse into the enemy's future. 3 days later, orders arrived for the first flight. Everything was prepared for weather reports, fuel loads, and safety checks. But beneath the routine, everyone felt it. A quiet tension, a sense that what they were about to witness might confirm their worst fears. At dawn, the hangar doors slid open. The Corsair rolled out onto the fog-covered runway. Its grey paint glinted faintly in the early light. For the first time in history, a German pilot was about to fly the most feared American fighter of the war. Lerche tightened his harness, adjusted the throttle, and signaled the ground crew. The propeller spun once, twice, then the engine roared to life. The aircraft trembled, straining against the brakes like a predator waiting to be released. As it began to move, the crew stepped back, shielding their faces from the blast of prop washing and snow. The Corsair gathered speed, wheels biting into the frozen runway, the sound rising to a deafening pitch, and then, with a sharp pull of the stick, it lifted smooth, steady, powerful. In that moment, Germany held its breath. The Luftwaffe had captured the enemy's most advanced weapon, but what they didn't yet realize was that flying it would reveal not their strength, but their weakness. August 8, 1944. The sky above Rechlin was clear, the air crisp and calm. Lerche climbed into the cockpit, his boots pressing against the pedals, hands gripping the center stick. The canvas cover had been removed. The cockpit smelled of oil and fresh paint, the polished dials gleaming in the morning light. For decades, he had flown dozens of captured Allied fighters, but this was different. He moved the throttle. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine roared like a living beast. 2,000 horsepower of pure force vibrating through the fuselage, shaking the wings with the promise of speed. The Corsair shuddered under him, eager, impatient, almost defiant. On the runway, the long nose blocked forward vision. Lerche had learned a trick from interrogated American pilots weaving side to side while taxiing to see the path ahead. He felt the machine responding to every subtle shift of his body, every nudge of the stick. At 80 knots, he pulled back. The Corsair leapt into the air with astonishing grace, climbing effortlessly. The initial acceleration was brutal, far beyond anything Lerche had experienced in a Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf. It surged forward, tail up, wings slicing the wind, propeller spinning like a storm. Once airborne, he began testing the basics. The roll rate was smooth but required effort at low speeds. The ailerons were heavy on the aircraft not designed for tight dogfights. But when he pushed the throttle to maximum, the speed climbed rapidly. 300 knots, 350, 400, and beyond. At 420 knots, he eased back, exhilarated. His mind raced. Germany's best fighters, the FW-190A-88 and Bf-109, could not match this. He climbed 6,000 meters, 20,000 feet, to begin vertical maneuvers. Corsair's true design philosophy became clear in a single terrifying test. A simple zoom climb shot the aircraft upward with unbelievable momentum. Altitude numbers ticked faster than his nerves could follow. 6,500 meters, 7,000, 7,500, finally stalling at 8,000 meters. A gain of 1,200 meters of pure energy alone. A dive followed. Lerche rolled inverted, pulled through, accelerated. Past 450 knots, then yanked the stick into a steep climb. The aircraft groaned. The G-forces pinned him into the seat. Yet the frame held, unwavering, climbing past 8,000 meters, 9,000, 10,000, until the altimeter froze at 10,400 meters. The revelation was undeniable. The Corsair wasn't designed to outturn German fighters in horizontal dogfights. It was built for vertical combat boom and zoom tactics. Dive from above, strike with speed, then climb back to altitude before the enemy reacts. Energy retention, raw acceleration, and climbing power made it nearly untouchable. He tested the gun platform next. 6 50-caliber machine guns, mounted in the wings, erupted into fire over the testing range. Despite the recoil, the airframe barely moved. The sight remained stable. Rounds hit the target consistently. Compared to German fighters, the Corsair traded punch for stability, a tactical advantage that would be lethal in the hands of a skilled pilot. Then came the final test, a simulated attack scenario. Lerche dove from 7,000 meters toward a theoretical German formation at 4,000. Speed built past 500 knots. At the bottom, he pulled into a climbing turn. The G-forces crushed him into the seat, his vision graying at the edges, yet the aircraft climbed like a rocket. 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, he was back at altitude. He compared the data to his previous tests in FW-190A-88. 5 minutes 50 seconds to climb the same distance in a German fighter, compared to 2 minutes 40 in the Corsair. A staggering advantage for 2 minutes and 10 seconds, enough for the Corsair to strike, escape, and strike again before the enemy recovers. The implications were immediate and terrifying. German pilots trained for horizontal dogfights, using turning combat to gain advantage. Against Corsair, those tactics became suicide. Any pursuit burned energy, leaving them vulnerable. If they hesitated, the Corsair climbed back effortlessly, ready for another attack. Lerche then probed weaknesses. At low speed, below 150 knots, the controls became heavy and sluggish. In turning combat, a Bf-109 or Fw-190 could dominate. Stall characteristics were vicious, snapping sharply at 85 knots. The long nose still blocked forward visibility. High-speed dives beyond 520 knots became challenging to control. Yet even these limitations were minor compared to the aircraft's overall power and energy advantage. After 45 minutes of flight, Lerche returned to Rechlin. The Corsair had not faltered. No damage, no system failures, no surprises. It had proven exactly what Japanese pilots had feared in the Pacific, a fighter built to dictate the terms of engagement, to strike, escape, and strike again without fear of pursuit. On the ground, mechanics swarmed the aircraft, inspected the frame, tested the guns, and checked every system. Lerche stepped down and immediately began drafting his report. Every detail, every number, every tactical observation was documented. 14 pages of meticulous analysis, blunt and unflinching. The Corsair was not just fast, not just powerful. It was fundamentally superior in energy fighting. Germany had captured one of the deadliest fighters in the world. And yet, even as Lerche wrote his report, he knew it would be ignored. The truth, he suspected, was too inconvenient for Luftwaffe command. The whistling death had come to German skies, and for a moment, the balance of air power seemed irrevocably changed. Lerche sat in the briefing room later that morning, reviewing his notes. He had flown the Corsair for less than an hour, yet every metric told the same story. This aircraft did not fight like any German plane. The implications for aerial combat were profound. If the Allies deployed these fighters over Europe in numbers, Luftwaffe pilots would be chasing shadows, struggling against a machine that dictated the engagement. Corsair's strength lies in energy retention. It could dive from above, strike with incredible speed, and climb back to altitude before an Fw-190 or Bf-109 could respond. German pilots relied on turning fights, drawing enemies into tight circles, bleeding off energy to gain positional advantage. Against the Corsair, that strategy became a trap. Pursue it in a climb, and the German fighter wasted precious altitude and speed. Hold back, and the Corsair simply regained height to attack again. Either way, the German pilot lost. He imagined the scenario from the cockpit. A formation of Fw-190S spots a Corsair at 7,000 meters. They dive into intercepts. The Corsair pilot sees the threat, pulls into a steep climb after a high-speed attack, and within minutes is back at the same altitude, guns ready, energy intact. The pursuing Germans are now low, slow, and exposed. Any follow-up attack risks their own destruction. Lerche ran into defensive scenarios in his mind. The only viable counter was to force the Corsair into low-speed maneuvering combat, where the aircraft's heavy controls and sluggish ailerons became a disadvantage. But that required baiting the Corsair into a trap, something experienced American pilots would never do. Visibility could be exploited, the long nose creating blind spots, but only if the German pilot maintained altitude advantage. Even then, success was uncertain. He documented simulated encounters, timing dives, and climbs meticulously. A dive from 7,000 to 4,000 meters, followed by a maximum climb back to 7,000, took 2 minutes and 40 seconds in the Corsair. The Fw-190 required nearly 6 minutes to regain the same altitude. That was a 2-minute, 15-second head start, an eternity in air combat, where seconds determined life or death. The Corsair's armament was equally intimidating. 6 .50 caliber machine guns, stable in high-speed dives and climbs, allowed pilots to maintain accuracy while unleashing sustained fire. Compared to the FW